So we've helped over 233,430 people become debt-free, and today I'm gonna share our exact debt playbook that's actually helped eliminate over $5.1 billion of debt so you can finally break free too.
We're breaking free!
Now, the secret behind the success is knowing the right debt option. But picking the right debt option can be the difference between paying minimums for 20 years with the same amount of debt, or being on vacation in Mykonos with a paid off house and a hefty retirement fund. So if you're serious about breaking free from debt, then do not skip this video. You don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. You don't have to drown in interest payments. And most importantly, you don't have to figure this out alone. I'm gonna share helpful resources and my exact playbook for informational purposes only so you can find your best option out of debt. Starting with the first step, which is absolutely crucial if you wanna become debt-free. Now, almost everyone skips this, and it's the reason they stay stuck in debt for 5, 10, or even 15 more years. And it's not because it's complicated, right? It's not some fancy financial trick. It's actually incredibly simple. I've seen it over and over. People are making minimum payments for years, thinking they're making progress, only to realize later they've actually paid more in interest than the original debt itself. A $5,000 credit card turns into $20,000 in payments and they're still not debt-free. So this one step, it's the thing that flips the light switch. It's the difference between hoping things get better and finally knowing what to do. So here's step one. Know exactly how much debt you have. I get it. Swiping the credit card feels like free money, but the money you're spending is going to come back and bite you. Many people don't even check their balances because looking feels overwhelming, right? And that's why the real number is the first step. Unfortunately, the longer you don't face the hard reality of your debt, the worse it can get. So take a deep breath and log into all your accounts and add up your debt. It's an important step to make sure your situation doesn't get worse. And let's be honest, right? This part can feel like a lot. Logging into every account, adding everything up manually, trying to track down balances across credit cards, personal loans, and bills. And that's exactly why people don't do this. But skipping this step, it's like how people stay stuck for years, paying thousands more in interest, feeling buried in debt with no plan. So we built a free calculator. It doesn't just show your total debt. It pulls the info securely from your credit report without hurting your score, so you don't have to dig through statements or guess what you owe. But here's what makes it different. It doesn't stop at the number. It actually will walk you through all of your options and compare them side by side based on your specific situation. You'll see the pros and cons, the cost, the timelines, the credit impact, all of it. There's no confusion, it's just clarity. And if you need help thinking through it, I have a team of people you can talk to who don't get paid to push one option over another. They just want to make sure you have a solid plan to get out of debt. Because the truth is, every day you delay this step is costing you money. There's more interest, there's more stress, right? And there's more wasted time. But if you just took 3 minutes today, that could change everything. And that's no exaggeration. I've seen people turn years of confusion into a crystal clear action plan in one afternoon just by starting here. You can do it manually if you want, but if you're short on time, if you're overwhelmed, or you just want a second opinion, take the calculator now. It's free, and it could be the smartest 3 minutes you spent this year. You'll find the link in the description. So if you decide to do it manually, make sure you add up all your credit cards, personal loans, and medical bills, and anything that has nothing tied to collateral. We'll put cars and mortgages and student loans aside. It's time to face the music. So knowing the total debt amount is great, but it doesn't show us how much you can actually afford, which brings us to step 2. But here's the thing, your debt amount alone doesn't tell you the full story at all. You could have $30,000 in debt and be just fine, or $7,000 and be drowning. But the question is why, right? Because it's not about what you owe, it's about how you can actually handle it. I've seen people fall into this trap over and over. They feel like they're doing okay because they're not missing payments, but behind the scenes, they're barely scraping by. Every single month, the stress builds. No savings, no safety net, just barely keeping up until something breaks. And that's why this next step is literally everything. And it's honestly not complicated. In fact, it comes down to a single number. So step 2, know your monthly cash flow. Your cash flow is your monthly income minus your monthly expenses. So you're gonna have to ask yourself a few things. First, what do you bring in every month, right? What's your take-home pay? And then what's going out every month? What are your expenses? And to do that, you can start with the basics. You can add up all your minimum payments and then add your housing, right? Whether that's a rent or a mortgage. You can add your utilities, transportation, food, insurance, and any reoccurring subscriptions. And be sure not to forget the hidden stuff. Those $5 app charges and those sneaky delivery fees add up. Now, if that's too much work for you, you can use the Payoff planner below to connect your accounts and automatically show your current cash flow. Now that you're looking at your cash flow, you can know a few things. One, if it's positive, this means you're likely in a healthy spot. You're able to keep up with the minimum payments and may have extra cash to pay down towards your debt faster. I'll share some ways for you to speed up your debt payoff and potentially save thousands in step 4. If your cash flow is around 0, this means you're about to break even with your current payments and you might need to make a change in order to see better progress. If it's negative, this means you're not able to keep up with your living costs and your minimum payments. You're either already behind on your payments or you will be falling behind in the future if nothing changes. Now don't worry, if this is you, I'm actually gonna go over some options to get ahead again. So at this point, you know your numbers. You know what you owe, you know what's coming in, and you know what's going out. But now comes the turning point, because this is where you're gonna find out, can I move faster or do I need a course correction? Now, for some people, they're already in a solid position, and that's great. But for others, even small changes right here can save them years of payments or thousands in interest. So step 3 is consider increasing your income or cutting your spending. For your income, consider other ways you can get some additional income. If you have extra time, you can maybe consider driving Uber, Lyft, or doing DoorDash. Now for your expenses, you're gonna wanna look over your spending and see what you can maybe cut back on. Maybe your cash flow is negative, but it's because you're spending thousands on unnecessary online shopping. See where you can cut back on your spending and increase your income, then total it all up to get your finalized cash flow. Now, you've done the hard part. You faced your debt, you've crunched the numbers, and now you know your cash flow. That alone puts you ahead of most people. But here's where the real fork in the road begins.
Hey, Fozzie, I want you to turn left if you come to a fork in the road.
Yes, sir. Turn left at the fork in the road. Permit!
I don't believe that.
Because, knowing your debt and your budget doesn't automatically solve the problem, sadly. It just means you're finally holding up that map. Now, the question is, which path actually gets you out? And here's the trap to it. Most people either guess what to do next or take advice from somebody that's trying to sell them something. That's how people end up stuck in the wrong program, wasting years and thousands of dollars. So this step, it's about never letting that happen to you. Because the truth is, there is literally no one-size-fits-all solution. The best option depends on your cash flow, your goals, and how much relief you actually need. So if you want to stop spinning your wheels and finally make a move that actually works, then step 4 is gonna be finding the option that makes sense for you. So I'm gonna break this down into a few scenarios. Scenario 1 is where your cash flow is positive, okay? Scenario 2 is where your cash flow is around 0. And scenario 3 is where your cash flow is negative. I'm gonna go through options and tools that can be helpful for each scenario, but to make it even easier, I linked a free debt calculator below that helps you instantly compare the pros and cons of each debt option for your specific situation. It'll even connect you with a partner that I have vetted for free consultations if you need. You can take the calculator now while you're watching. Seriously, it's free and it works. Okay, so the first scenario we're gonna cover is your cash flow's positive. So scenario 1. So let's say your cash flow's positive. You're covering all your bills. You're not falling behind and you might even be throwing a little extra towards your debt each month. Now that's great news, but it does come with a trap. When things feel fine, we tend to go on autopilot. But here's the truth. Just making minimum payments isn't the same as making progress. Because if you don't use your extra cash strategically, you could still end up spending years longer and thousands more than you need to. This is going to be your opportunity to get ahead, but only if you choose the right path. So I'm gonna walk you through your smartest 3 paths. So starting with the first option is gonna be if your cash flow is positive, this is often the simplest path to take. You don't need to hire anyone, you don't need to take out a new loan, you just need to be strategic. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to pay a little extra on every account, or they focus on whatever payment feels urgent. And by doing that, they spread their efforts thin and they actually stay stuck longer than they need to. I've seen people pay for years that way, and then they only realize that they barely made a dent in the total. So here's the smarter way. You're gonna wanna use a payoff plan. Payoff plans are when you first pay all your minimums and then put all of your extra cash towards one account until that's fully paid off. Then you're gonna take everything you were just paying towards that account and throw it to the next account and the next and then the next. Now there are a few different kind of payoff plans you can pick from. There's the snowball method. That's where you focus on paying off the smallest balance first. This can be nice because you can see a smaller balance get paid off sooner, but may end up costing you a lot more since it's not considering any interest rates. Dave Ramsey came up with this method and it can be helpful for a lot of people, but it might not save you the most or actually get you out of debt the fastest. Then there's the avalanche method, where you pay off the highest interest debt first. This can be the fastest payoff method that saves you the most money, as you're now focusing on paying off the highest interest debt first. But I will say it can be discouraging if your highest interest account is your biggest account, since it may take time to pay that account off and get that satisfaction of getting rid of one account. Now, the snowball method and the avalanche method have the pros and cons, and so we actually created the savvy method where we will combine the two and pay off some of the smaller accounts first, so you have that satisfaction of seeing accounts go away, and then focus on paying the higher interest debt so then you can get out of the debt faster and cheaper. Now, let me give you an example. Okay, let's say you have 3 cards. The first card happens to be a $10,000 balance with Amex, and that card's interest rate is 28%. Then you have a $5,000 Capital One card at a 23% interest rate, and you have a $1,000 Chase card at 25%. Now with the snowball method, you're gonna be paying off your cards in this order. You have the $1,000 Chase, the $5,000 Capital One, and then the $10,000 Amex. With the avalanche method, you would actually pay off your cards in this order. You would be paying it off with the $10,000 Amex being the first card to pay off, then the $1,000 Chase card, and then the $5,000 Capital One card. Now with the savvy method, you would actually pay it off in this order. You'd take care of that $1,000 Chase card, then that $10,000 Amex, and then finally that $5,000 Capital One card. Payoff plans honestly can be a great tool, but what if I told you there are actually other tools you can use in combination with or separate from payoff plans to even get out of this debt even faster? But here's the deal. If you have good credit, you may qualify for a true 0% interest balance transfer card. Now, if you use it correctly, this lets you move your highest interest debt onto a card that charges no interest for a set period of time. It could be a year to a year and a half. Now, during that time, every payment you make goes straight towards principal. No fees, no interest, just progress. But you do really need to be smart about it. You want to try to pay it off before the promo ends to avoid paying interest, and you want to factor in any transfer fees, and that may be around 3 to 5%. Also, you want to double check it's a true 0% offer, not deferred interest. There are 0% deferred interest cards that make it so if you don't pay off the full balance of the account before the promotion ends, you need to retroactively pay the full interest that would have accrued, even if you just had a few dollars left. If it's a deferred interest card, you may want to be confident that you can pay off the balance in full before the promotional period ends. Now, if you're organized and disciplined, this could be one of the fastest and cheapest ways to knock down your balances. Now, let's say your debt is spread out, multiple cards, different due dates, different rates, it's manageable, it's just messy, right? You've got good credit, some financial breathing room, but it feels like you're fighting on too many fronts at once. That's when things fall through the cracks. You miss a payment, your rate jumps up, you forget about a fee, and then suddenly it snowballs. You're not in danger, but you're also not really in control. So in this situation, a consolidation loan could actually bring everything under one roof, right? You have one payment, one interest rate, more simplicity, and potentially more savings. But you'll want to actually make sure that there aren't any hidden fees and that the math actually works out, and which I'm going to talk about too. So if you do this, make sure the interest rate of the loan is lower than the rate that you are paying off. You'll also need to take into account the account origination fees, the fee that the company charges you for taking the loan in the beginning of the calculation. Let's say you have $15,000 of credit card debt with an average interest rate of 27%, and you want to lower your interest rate. So you take out a $20,000 loan with a 13% interest rate over 5 years. But if there's a 7% origination fee, you would only get $18,600 of actual money from the loan, but you're still paying interest and payments on the $20,000 loan, not $18,600. Now compare that to just aggressively paying off the credit card debt at 27%. If you did that over 5 years, your monthly payment would need to be over $510 to just break even with the cost of the loan. So would this loan actually save you money? Yes, if you're currently paying the minimums or anything less than $510 a month on your cards. No, if you're already paying more than that and making fast progress on your own. Ultimately, you just want to make sure you run the numbers to see how much a lower interest rate would save you, if at all, as it can depend on how much you can afford to put towards the debt. Now, these are all helpful options if you're able to keep up with your payments and have additional income to put towards the debt. But you need to remember, these are just tools. They only work if you stop adding new debt and stick to the actual plan. Okay, let's look at scenario 2. Your cash flow is around 0. Now, you're making every payment, you're doing everything right, but your balances, they're not really moving, right? It's like you're kind of stuck on a treadmill. You're working super hard to just stay in one place. Now, that treadmill feeling, it's actually super real and incredibly dangerous, because if interest keeps winning, even your best efforts will not matter at all. And every month feels like the same. You get the paycheck in, the bills go out, but no progress. Now, this is the danger zone where people stay stuck the longest. Because when you're not in crisis, it's easy to think that things are fine, right? I get the mindset of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but that's not here, right? But interest is quietly draining your momentum. And if you don't do something about it, you could end up paying for the next 15 to 20 years. So the question is, what do you do? And this is where it's all about making your dollars count by lowering your rates and stretching every dollar further. Some people in this situation decide to file bankruptcy, but if you're still current, you might not need that much relief. But what you do need is a smarter strategy. So I'm gonna walk you through a few that may be able to help. Now, consolidation loans. Like I mentioned in the last scenario, a consolidation loan could lower your interest rate and roll your high interest debts into one predictable monthly payment. It may be hard to qualify for one of these unless you have a good credit score. I won't spend more time on it since we already covered it in scenario 1. So let's say your credit score is not great. You've been keeping up, but it's taken a toll. And so now traditional options like a low interest loan might not really be feasible. Still, you're not ready to fall behind. You're doing your best, but the balance, it just won't move, right? There's no budge there. Now, a debt management plan. That's through a nonprofit credit counseling agency that could be the bridge you're looking for. With a debt management program, they work directly with your creditors to reduce your interest rates, sometimes as low as 6% or even 0%. You just have to make one payment per month for that program. Your balances start to shrink instead of standing still. And you don't have to fall behind or risk any kind of lawsuit to get help. I know it's not flashy, but for people stuck in the just barely keeping up zone, it's a game changer. There's usually a small monthly service fee, but the overall savings on interest can be significant. I've seen them take people who have been paying minimums for over 20 plus years, get them out of debt in under 3 years with a much lower monthly payment. So let me make this simple for you. If you're paying your bills but getting nowhere, a nonprofit debt management program could cut your interest and shrink your payments and get you out of debt in under 5 years. And before you jump to it, this is not the same as debt settlement or what people typically call debt consolidation programs. Now, the huge difference between the two is that in this option, the debt management program, you're not falling behind on your debt. And you're not risking a lawsuit since all the agreements are done upfront with the creditors. Although you do need to close your cards in order to do this, we typically see people's credit score rise substantially after 6 months in the program since they are paying much more towards principal than they were before. Now, with these debt management programs, they typically take around 3 to 5 years and do require you to stop using your credit cards. But they are a great middle ground option if your credit isn't great for a low interest loan, and you're only able to keep up with the minimum payments, and you're in this hamster wheel. Now, maybe you're a homeowner. You've built up some equity over the years. Here's the difficult part. You're sitting on financial value, but you're stuck paying 20 to 30% interest every month. And every time you make a payment, you wonder, why am I still paying this much when I actually have value in my home? Now, if you're confident in your ability to stay current, tapping into your home's equity could let you trade high interest chaos for low interest stability. That could be a HELOC, it could be a cash out refi, or a home invest could give you the access to lower interest money that could use to pay off high interest debt. Now, it's important to be careful here though. This option turns unsecured debt into secured debt, which means your home is now on the line if you fall behind. It works well for some people, but it does come with risks. But if you use it wisely, this option could dramatically cut your interest and give you breathing room again. Consider only using this option if you're confident in your ability to stay current and if the interest savings are substantial. So if you're in scenario 2, here's the good news. You don't need to fall behind to fix this. You do not need to wait until it hits a crisis. You just need to stop playing the interest game and start stretching your dollars further. Now let's talk about the hardest place to be. Your cash flow is negative. That means you're not just treading water anymore. Sadly, you're starting to sink. You're not breaking even, you're falling behind. You might already be missing payments, or you know it's only a matter of time before that happens. Credit cards aren't just debt, they sometimes are survival. Groceries, gas, bills, everything's on borrowed time and you have to pick which bills to pay. You're working harder than ever. You're not just stressed, you're actually scared at this point, right? This is when debt doesn't just feel stressful, it feels unsurvivable. You wake up already anxious, you don't want to check your bank account. Every unexpected bill, every flat tire or medical surprise feels like it might break you. And this is where most people freeze. Not because they're lazy, right? But because no one ever told them what actually works when the math isn't mathin'. So let's fix that. This isn't going to be you. You're not going to freeze. Let's find the plan that helps you get your life back. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about reclaiming your ability to breathe and have peace. But here's the good news. You're watching this, which means you're already doing what 99% of people won't. We've made a free tool that shows what relief you'll actually qualify for. It's going to be based on your income, your debt, and your actual situation. It compares options side by side, bankruptcy, debt settlement, and more, so you can see clearly before you choose. Now take the calculator while you're watching. The link's below. You might be surprised how much faster and cheaper your path out really is. It's important to note that these options I'm about to go over with you can help you get ahead and get you out of debt even if your cash flow is negative, but you may need to change your spending habits or your lifestyle to make sure after you get out of debt, you don't fall right back in. Now, if you're already past this point where cutting expenses or picking up extra shifts can't fix the gap, then it might be time to consider more serious forms of debt relief. Now, one single mom I've actually helped was in $40,000 of debt. She was choosing between feeding her kids and making minimum payments. Her credit was shot and her mental health was worse. She thought the only option was, I'm gonna keep pushing until things collapse, right? But instead, she found a path that gave her a reset, and within 6 months, she was breathing again. Her score was rebounding and she had hope. So let's walk through those options that can help you rebuild from here, faster than you think and smarter than most people realize. If you're falling behind and you can't catch up, it might be time to consider bankruptcy or debt settlement. I know there is a lot of negative stigma around both of them, but when I'm chatting with people who are considering this, the unfortunate reality is that they are already falling behind. So the question to ask is, what is your best path forward so you can rebuild and achieve your financial goals sooner? The reality is, these are just tools to help you get further ahead. So how do you find your best option between bankruptcy and debt settlement? First, if your debt balance is under $10,000, you might not want to explore bankruptcy. Different people and different attorneys have their own thoughts on how much debt you need to have for bankruptcy to be worth it, so decide for yourself or chat with an attorney. But it may work just by negotiating out the debts yourself with the creditors and setting up payment plans that work for you. Generally speaking, when you're in this situation, people tend to bounce back faster doing a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I know that bankruptcy has a stigma, but the truth is it was built specifically for people in situations like this. People often hear bankruptcy and want to run away, but I'll share why this typically helps people bounce faster than debt settlement or Chapter 13. So first, what actually happens in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Well, for one, Your unsecured debts are going to most likely get wiped away, discharged, forgiven, goodbye. It's going to take typically around 3 to 4 months. There is legal protection from your creditors, so they can't sue you or collect on the debt anymore. The total cost to you is around $1,000 to $3,000 if you're filing with an attorney. There is risk of losing assets like a home or a car, although most people are able to keep their assets when filing. I'll talk more about that later. You need to qualify to be able to file by passing what's called the means test. And because it's so much cheaper and faster than other options, Chapter 7 typically tends to help people bounce back faster. So here's the bottom line. Chapter 7 is the fastest, cheapest reset, but only if you qualify and you're not risking any major assets. There is a hit to your credit, but it's a clean hit. What does that even mean? It means you start rebuilding your credit right when you get discharged with nothing holding you back. Your score won't be capped. Unfortunately, if you're looking at this, you are likely falling behind on your payments already, so there will be some sort of negative mark on your report anyways, right? So it's all about what's your best foot forward. Sure, your credit report will say you filed Chapter 7 and it'll stay on there for 10 years, but it doesn't mean you're not gonna have access to credit again. I often see lenders and landlords care more about your current credit score and your ability to pay them back. In fact, right after people file, they start getting mailers to apply for new credit, since these creditors know that you no longer have the previous debt obligations, so you have more money to spend, probably want to rebuild your credit, and you won't be able to file another Chapter 7 in another 8 years anyways. Since it's done in 4 months, you can start rebuilding your credit so much sooner than the other options. And since it's only $1,000 to $3,000, you can use the extra money you save to rebuild your credit. Often there is a hit to your credit score when you file bankruptcy, but it really actually depends on where your score is when you file. Some people see a temporary 100 to 200 point drop in their credit score, but when my friend actually filed, his credit score actually jumped up 200 points from the 400s to the 600s. It all depends on where you're starting from. Since he had delinquencies on his report already, bankruptcy was a big reset for him. In fact, he was actually able to get his credit score to the lower 700s within a year after he filed. Of course, he was diligent, right? He was smart about his credit usage, but the point is, rebuilding after bankruptcy is unbelievably doable. All right, Chapter 7 sounds great, but you might be asking yourself, what about the risk of losing assets? I don't want to lose my house. Yeah, I know. In Chapter 7, there is a risk of losing assets, but most people who file don't lose their assets, and you can know if you will be able to keep your assets before you file. Here's how it works. Most every state has their own exemption limits of how much equity you can have in your car, your home, etc. to keep it. So now that you know that Chapter 7 bankruptcy can be an unhelpful option to get ahead if your cash flow is negative, how do you know if you qualify to file? There's something called the Chapter 7 means test that compares your household income to your state's median income for your household size. If your income is below that amount or you don't have enough disposable income, you may be able to qualify. Attorneys can do these estimates for you in a free consultation, or you can literally just use our free calculator that is linked below that I keep talking about that can estimate if you can qualify in less than a minute. Now, let's say you don't qualify for Chapter 7, or you own a car or a home that's not covered in the bankruptcy exemptions in your state. Now what? Well, if this is you, then you may want to compare between Chapter 13 bankruptcy or debt settlement and figure out, okay, which one's gonna be cheaper for me? Starting with how much disposable income you have available to pay towards your debt. We can go back to the cash flow exercise we did earlier and take your total income and minus your expenses from it, but this time, don't include your unsecured debt payments in your example. Since you pay as much as you can towards the debt and don't save a lot in Chapter 13, we can use your disposable income to help estimate how much your Chapter 13 plan could be. For example, let's say you have $80,000 of unsecured debt and you have a $2,000 a month in disposable income to pay towards your debt. And you're going to be put in a 5-year plan because your income's over the median. Over the 5 years of $2,000 a month, you have the ability to pay around $120,000, which is more than your $80,000 of debt. So you would be likely in what's called a 100% Chapter 13 plan, where you end up paying the full balance, plus having to pay the attorney and trustee fees as well. So at that point, you're ultimately trying to save more on interest. Now, for simple numbers, let's estimate that a settlement program would cost you around $60,000 in total. I'll talk more on how we get to this number later, but stay with me. In this case, a debt settlement program would likely be significantly cheaper since you're likely not having to pay the full balance over the course of the settlement. Paying back $60,000 is a lot cheaper than paying back $80,000 plus in a 100% Chapter 13 plan. But let's say you're in the same situation. But this time you only have $500 a month in disposable income and you have no high value assets like cars or homes. So $500 a month over 5 years would be $30,000, which is less than your current balance of your debt. So you might not actually have to pay the full balance back over the course of a 13. In this case, a Chapter 13 could actually be cheaper since you can only afford to pay back $30,000 of the debt and the rest would be wiped away. While in debt settlement, you may have to pay around $60,000. So great, but let's keep this example of $80,000 of debt in mind and $500 a month in disposable income, but this time you own a house with $250,000 worth of home equity. Like I mentioned earlier, most every state has their own exemption limits for different properties in bankruptcy. So for primary homes, this is called the homestead exemption. In Chapter 13, this is used to determine how much non-exempt equity you have. So for this example, let's say I live in a state where the homestead exemption is $100,000. This means of my $250,000 of home equity, $150,000 is considered non-exempt equity. But why does this even matter? In a Chapter 13, you want to keep your assets, you would need to at least pay your creditors at your non-exempt equity throughout the payment plan. Basically, the court is saying you own a house worth the value and we can make you sell it to pay back the creditors, or we'll let you keep it if you pay the value of your equity you own to your creditors up to however much you owe them. So back to that example. If you have $150,000 of non-exempt equity, to keep your house, you would need to pay back the full $80,000 to your creditors over the course of a Chapter 13, plus the attorney fees and trustee fees, even though you don't have enough disposable income to even cover that. So in this case, then a debt settlement program is likely significantly cheaper because instead of paying $80,000 plus attorney fees and trustee fees, you could pay $60,000 in total with debt settlement. So what does this even mean for you? If you have more income, debt settlement may be cheaper. If you have less income, Chapter 13 might save you more money and wipe out more debt. So back to the question, how did we come up with $60,000 for a total cost of a debt settlement program? To understand how we got there, we need to understand how a debt settlement program works. Debt settlement is when you fall behind on payments and negotiate down the balances for less than what's owed. Typically, you aim to settle for 50 cents on the dollar or less if it's a lump sum settlement. But it really just depends on the creditor and the nature of your debt and a few other factors. Now, you can do this yourself, right? Or you can have a company do it for you. A good fee for a company is typically going to be around 15 to 25%. So assuming you settle for 50%, you would pay back around 65 to 75% of your total debt over time. Now, of course, you take a credit score hit every month because you're behind and you risk yourself of being sued. But you're already falling behind, right? You're in this scenario. Or you're going to fall behind anyways. And if you get sued, a good debt settlement company should be able to help you get a settlement before the court date. However, settlements for those accounts that get into litigation may end up being higher. Companies that settle for 50 cents might only settle for 65 to 85 cents on the dollar when there's a lawsuit. So as you make payments on your settlements, your credit score may start to gradually go up proportional to your other debt and credit history. Now, another thing to watch out for is the potential tax implications. When you have a debt that is forgiven, you may be given a tax form counting the forgiven debt as taxable income. Now, if a $10,000 debt is settled for $6,000, you may get a tax form that is $4,000 as income. Now, whether or not you need to pay taxes on it may depend on whether your tax solvency. So if your liabilities are greater than your assets, meaning you owe more than you own, you could be tax insolvent and might not need to pay taxes on the forgiven debt. This is the case for the majority of people we see go into these kind of programs as they owe more than they have in assets. But if your assets are greater than your liabilities, you own more than you owe, then you may need to pay the taxes on the forgiven debt as income. It can be helpful to check with a tax professional to know what this looks like for your specific situation. So back to the $80,000 in debt example. If you settle for 50% and get charged a 25% settlement fee, you could pay 75% of the debt back, which is $60,000. If Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 are not good fits, then debt settlement could be a decent option. But should you do it yourself? Should you settle with the creditors on your own? Or should you work with a company? And if you work with a company, how do you find a good company? Now, debt settlement is something you can absolutely do on your own. If you have the time, you have the energy, and you know how to settle with creditors directly, you can save on not having to pay the settlement fees for a company to do it for you. Doing it for yourself would mean you handle all the calls, the follow-ups, the negotiations, and keep track of your payments to each creditor individually. It can be a lot of work, but it can be worth it if you have the time and the bandwidth to save on the fees. Working with a company can be worth it as well. Companies typically have an existing relationship with creditors. They know what they typically settle for. They have strategies to get you the best deal possible. For example, if a company gets a settlement for 20% cheaper than what you would have gotten yourself, the 20% you saved could have paid the settlement fee right there and save you the headache. Now, when you work with a company, they do all the work for you and turn it into one payment. When you stop making payments to the creditors, you're now making a one monthly payment into this special purpose escrow account instead, and then once the creditors are ready to settle, there are enough funds to settle, they reach out to your creditors and negotiate a settlement for you. It sounds awesome, right? It can be, but you have to watch out for fees and bad actors. So how do you know how to find a good company to work with? Here's what you want to look for. Ignore the monthly draft amount they quote you. That number is kind of meaningless. Realistically, any company can quote you $1 a month if they wanted to, and then just increase your drafts when settlements come in. A lot of people come to these programs looking to lower their monthly draft, which I get. Unfortunately, a company can quote you whatever monthly draft you want and just increase it later. Typically, having a higher draft can actually help you get settlements sooner, rebuild your credit sooner, and potentially avoid lawsuits since you're able to settle sooner. So, if we're not looking at the monthly draft, what should we be comparing between companies? So what actually matters is the fee percentage. Most companies charge around 15 to 25% of your enrolled debt. So that means if you roll 80 grand in the program, you're paying between $12,000 to $20,000 in fees, which is a lot, but to be fair, it is also a lot of work to do the debt settlement process. So when you're comparing companies, make sure you compare the actual fee percentage, because that's how you can know, is this company gonna be cheaper than the other company? So for example, let's say company 1 could quote you $400 a month with a 30% fee, while company 2 is quoting you $500 a month with a 20% fee. You would end up paying a lower fee going with the $500 a month company. On top of fees, you want to make sure you're reading reviews and only work with companies that are transparent about their fee structure. Lots of companies have great reviews, but oftentimes because people are writing reviews right after they sign up, they feel a great sort of relief knowing that someone just helped them, but sometimes they don't fully understand what they signed up for and what kind of cons come with it. So make sure you look for reviews from people that fully completed the program with a company to get a more holistic look at the company. I've actually vetted several firms who pass my standards and offer free consultations, which you can get a free consultation if you take the calculator below. Now, based on how much debt you actually have and your cash flow, you have a sense of how much relief you can actually need and some relevant options to get you out of debt. If your cash flow is positive, you consider doing debt payoff plans like Savvy, Avalanche, or the Snowball method, or even combine it with a balance transfer card or a consolidation loan. If your cash flow is just break even or zero, you could do debt consolidation loans, debt management plans, or use potentially the equity options to lower your interest rates and make progress paying down your debt without changing how much money you make or how much you spend. Now, if your cash flow is negative, you could try to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy for the cheapest and fastest way, or see whether debt settlement or Chapter 13 is cheaper if you don't qualify, so that way you can start getting back ahead and rebuilding. Here's your game plan. Know your debt, understand your cash flow, explore your options, and take action. Stop waiting. Debt doesn't fix itself, but the good news is once you take that first step, whether it's using the calculator, making a call, or simply writing down your balances, you're already on your way. And hey, if you're still unsure, that's okay. Rewatch the section that applies to you, talk it through with a trusted friend, or reach out for a free consultation with one of the vetted partners we've linked. Your future self will thank you, your family will thank you, and that version of you that's debt-free, confident, and finally breathing again, yeah, they're closer than you think. So go take that calculator. It can be the most important financial decision you've ever made. You got this. Now that you know how to figure out your debt amount, your cash flow, and which path makes the most sense for you, there's still one decision that can completely change your outcome, and it's the one most people get wrong. Should you use debt consolidation? And if so, which type actually helps you and which one sets you back? because not all consolidation is actually created equal. Some options can save you thousands, others can quietly trap you in more debt, even as you think you're making progress. I've seen it many times. People jump in without understanding the difference, and 6 months later, they're deeper into debt, they're facing lawsuits, and now they're finally considering bankruptcy. So if you want to protect your progress and avoid one of the biggest mistakes people make, watch this video next. In it, I will break down exactly what most companies don't tell you and how to know which type of consolidation is right for you. It's short and it could save you years of regret.